I am Terry Fisher-Ari. I'm so excited to be with y'all today, thinking deeply about what it means to make sure that all of our children are seen and heard in our communities, in our classrooms, in our curriculum, and how we can build that kind of world.
And I am Maggie Deaton. I'm from the Rollins Center for Language and Literacy as well at our Cox Campus, a program of the Atlanta Speech School. And my role is the lead facilitator for the Dual Language Learners program. So I'm particularly excited about this content around how to create culturally responsive and preserving classrooms and how we do that for all children and how that contributes to an ecosystem where young children can thrive. And so looking forward to being with you today and hearing from you and having a conversation together.
So as you get settled in, we are going to ask you really quickly if you are a Cox Campus member and to tell us a little bit about your role. We're coming from different places and different spaces, and all of us are working to make sure children are growing and thriving. So let us know a little bit about you. There'll be a poll that populates in just a moment. And also, as you're doing it, if you're wrapping it up, we're going to remind you this a couple other times. But join Cox Campus if you haven't, and we'll send you that link in just a minute. So if you answer no, don't worry. 2 quick questions, 3 quick questions as we get settled.
It looks like we have lots of Cox Campus members here with us, as well as nearly half are teachers. So we have a big mix of instructional leads, coaches, people who might identify multiple roles. Parents, people that say other, which could mean so many different things in the world of education. Whoever you are, we're glad that you're here and that you're joining us. All right, and so I also see in the poll that the last question is, have you taken the ecosystem course on Cox Campus? So that course, the full name is the Ecosystem Approach to Developing the Foundation of Reading in the Early Years. And that course, all of this content across the year-long journey comes from that course. So if you haven't taken that course, we encourage you to do so.
And we hope that by the end of this session, you're so excited to go in and take it if you haven't yet, or to think more about this element specifically and how it is a part of this larger commitment to supporting all of our children as we think together across the year-long journey and building the ecosystem together. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about yourselves. You've heard about us, and now we're going to think about who our children are and how we can really support them together throughout our time together today. So you're here alongside of Rollins and Rollins Center for Language and Literacy. Our mission is to really support literacy and justice for all, for every child. And as we think about that, our stated mission that we're really grappling with working to make true and how we're doing that alongside of you and all the spaces that you are is really to think about how to cultivate the expertise of all of us, with educators, system leaders, families, advocates, with the sciences of healthy brain development, language, and literacy, so that all children can think critically and act boldly to reshape the world, all children and all of us. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, about how we can work, all of us, to leverage our voices, our lives, and work to make it a more just and whole place for all of us and for all of our children, where all of us can thrive. So we're going to talk more about how this element really is a way to live out, to embody this mission and the vision as we work together to build the foundation for thriving for all of our children. You are already a part of Cox Campus. You're already a part of the Cox family. And as we sit together, as we work together in this mission and vision for literacy and justice for all, we really work to make sure all of our work on Cox and all of our work that we're doing alongside of you is rewarding, that you feel affirmed, inspired, encouraged, empowered, connected. This is a learning community. We are all working together to develop and to grow. This is a safe place and also a brave place, a place for us to look at ourselves and to challenge ourselves and to look at our world and to challenge our world. And it matters. This is worthy work. It is important work. It is essential work as all of us grapple and grow together. So thank you for being a part of the Cox Campus family as we work to make all of these things real and as we work to live out our shared vision and mission together.
And Terry, if I can jump in, I would just say these same words for today's time together. We want to hear from you, so feel free, stay on mute when you're not sharing, but when you would like to share, come off mute, drop it in the chat. We want to hear from you. That's how we can connect and grow more. And we also, want to commit to you that we hope you'll leave today with something that's essential, something that makes a difference tomorrow and in your long-term practice, and something that you can keep thinking about that hopefully this time will be rewarding. All right, so we're going to keep going. And we want to remind you too today, if you're not logged into Cox, that everything will work better throughout the session if you go ahead and sign up for Cox and be logged in, because in order to open all of the links that are throughout today's presentation, you're going to need to be a Cox member in order to download them. You can see them, but then you can't download them unless you're logged in. So go ahead and take a minute, get signed into Cox, make an account if you need to, and that's just coxcampus.org. Thank you, Shantae, for dropping that link. And here you see Cox Campus, what it looks like, and you can see in the right-hand corner to log in if you already have an account or to sign up.
It takes about 1 minute, so we're going to give you that time now just to hold some space for you to be able to do it if you haven't yet. And we can run through the agenda while we're doing that too, and just let you know kind of what to expect of our time today. So we're engaging in our opening connection in just a minute as we've been working to get settled and situated and set our intentions. We're going to talk more about culturally responsive and preserving environments, and element number 2 for ecosystem, take a closer look at what it means in practice and think about ideas that really can foster our own critical consciousness and this culturally preserving and responsive environment in our classrooms on the daily, tomorrow, in the morning when you meet children again. And then we're going to engage in some next steps together, think about what we're going to go out and do in the world and make that next step together. So this is our plan for the next hour. We're so glad you're joining us, and we can't wait to see and hear from you. So now that you've taken a minute and you've joined Cox, if you hadn't, we're going to just sit down with ourselves for a moment, and we're going to think about the last time or a time that you've really felt known and seen and cared about by a teacher that you had, maybe when you were young, maybe more recently by a leader that you have. And we want you to tap back into that moment, that time, that space where you felt like you could be brave and that you could show up and that you were really cared for. Oh, so encouraging. There's encouraging words in the chat already. What did that person say or do that helps you feel known and seen and cared about? So think about it. What has you experienced in your own life that's really made you feel these things? What are some moves, some actions other people take? What are some words that they said? Please drop it in the chat how they acted or what they did to help you feel so cared for, seen, and known. It matters when our efforts are seen and acknowledged. Thank you for sharing, Vince. A brave child who has so much to offer. Indeed, Ernestine. And look how you're working still to live into those words, right? And make them so real in your life every day. Beautiful. There are other things that people did or said to make you feel so seen and known and cared for? Wow. Quote worthy words, how all of us say things and offer things that are worth everyone taking a moment and learning from. Thank you for sharing, Maggie. And the love of children. A time when you felt seen and known and loved. We'd love to see your thoughts in the chat, and also just sit with that memory too, with the person that you're thinking of who made you feel so connected and cared for, and as if you matter as you do.
And feel free, you can keep typing in the chat. Also, if you just want to say it, if you feel more comfortable just sharing your voice, feel free to come off mute too. When your work is appreciated, Carolina, that's awesome. And Alicia, you shared that your child, your 2-year-old, called you "bye mama." She really loves you. She puts you in the same place as her mom.
So precious. Yeah, the affirmations and being seen and having people say what they see in you. Ways people are equipping us to do the work and to be even more successful.
And it sounds like a neat connection, Kanisha, you brought up, is that today we really hope to give you some ideas and to hear ideas from each other so that you have these tools in order to create learning environments where kids can see themselves, where they can feel like they make a difference in the same way that you all make differences. It's such a difference every day as teachers and leaders and educators and families.
We want to thank you for tapping into a time when you felt so loved and cared for and seen, and hold that moment and that thought and that feeling, those actions other people take and have taken with us as you move through today's course and as you move into your own classroom tomorrow. We're going to talk more about what that looks like and how we can make sure that every child feels so seen and loved and cared for in our spaces. Maggie, I think you're on mute, my friend.
Thank you, Terry. So this is the ecosystem element fan. And so there's 9 pieces that we kind of say are key, all contributing to creating an ecosystem where young children can thrive and create that foundation of reading in the early years. And so last time when we were together in Year-Long Journey last month, Letha and I really focused with you on safe and responsive classroom. And now we're moving to the second one, culturally responsive and preserving environment. And you see these are grouped into 3 colors. These first 3, the blue ones, are all about climate. How do we create a climate where children thrive? The second set of yellow ones are about content. The red pieces of the ecosystem are all about connections. And so we're going to stay here in climate and focus right here where you see the star. Okay. And so this is a tool, and Deanna's going to drop this in the chat. Thank you to our teammate, Deanna, for working the chat, and to Toki for working slides, and Shantae for being here. This is a tool that's pulled. This is a page from the ecosystem construction measure. So if you've been in other sessions, you've seen other parts of this tool. And we are looking right here at the one for culturally responsive and preserving environment. So this is a reflection tool, a goal setting tool, a tool for you to look at and say, when I think about this element, what does this look like? So you see a description, and you see what could be some sources of evidence. And so the description here is the cultural aspects of children and families are woven consistently and authentically into the curriculum, learning experiences, and surrounding environment. And also there's part of this too, that because of that and through that, children can take action and make a difference. And Carrie's going to go into that more deeply later. And so we want you to just take some time to look at this and think about your own work. And when you think about your practice, the work that you do in whatever context, how are you doing? How are you feeling about this element in your work with children? And so for a minute, if we go to the next slide, I want to show you a way we're going to interact with this. And we're going to use the annotation tools. And so how to use the annotation tools is at the top of your screen or bottom. It might be the bottom where it says view options. It'll say like, you're viewing Cox Campus's screen, view options. And I scroll down and I see annotate. And so I want to click, and you see in my little circle, there's a pencil. So you want to find that little pencil, or it might just say annotate, click there. And then you have options. And I really like the stamp. When you click on the stamp, you can then pick a picture like the star and you start clicking on the screen. And so with that in mind, we're going to go to the next slide. And I'm going to just put up for 2 minutes a timer. Just look at this, read it, think about your own practice, think about what we're saying culturally responsive preserving environments are, and annotate where you feel like you might fall in your own practice. Remember that we're not going to see your names when this comes up. It's just a little star. If you can't figure out how annotate works, you can also just drop in the chat. I'm feeling like I'm developing because I do this, but I want to do more of this. So we're going to start this timer and just be quiet for a couple of minutes while you think and reflect. Right, so again, in order to kind of share with everybody as you're reading, go up to the annotate tool, the top of your screen. You'll see a pencil, it'll say annotate, or you might see 3 little dots that say more and find annotate there. And start showing us on the screen, circle or put a stamp where you think you are feeling, how are you doing in your own work. And if that feels tricky, feel free to just drop a number in the chat. Or a word, established, emerging, developing. You see some hearts coming up at developing, a little arrow really pointing, this is what I feel like I'm doing well. Staff uses information obtained about children's, languages and cultures and consistently integrates some of those elements into the daily routine, like a good morning song. Awesome. See some stars and emerging and developing. People are in different places, and that makes sense because we're always growing. There's always things we want to learn more about, always things we should be celebrating about what we're already doing. And so let's look in the chat here. I see some people put developing, depends on the room, but emerging and developing, right? Maybe you're in a situation where you're working multiple contexts, float around. Awesome. All right. So Deanna's going to drop, I think, in the chat, this tool, the ecosystem construction measure. So this one tool has all 9 elements for you to self-reflect. And we just wanted to show you this one piece. And she's also just dropped the closer look at the essential elements, which we're going to look at next. All right. Thank you, Deanna. So I see the ecosystem construction measure just got dropped, and that's that tool. And the first one she dropped is something that goes with it to help you reflect. So let's move there.
So friends, as we think about where we are, where we want to go, this tool, this closer look document really does support us in that work and thinking about what does this mean in practice and how can I move from where I am to where I'm trying to go? How can I work on growing and how can I really understand it more deeply? And this closer look document is a really beautiful and useful tool for developing our own practice and working alongside of others in community to do that. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do here, are you ready to play, y'all? Hope you're ready to play because we're going to do a text rendering. And it sounds complicated, but actually what we're going to do when we take a look at this first part of what is a culturally responsive and preserving environment, and why does it matter? What I want you to do is think about, do any words jump out at you? Do any phrases sit with you and resonate with you? Is there any sentence you're like, that right there? Okay. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do is whenever you see something, you're like, this word, this phrase, this sentence, whatever it is, could you drop it in the chat? And that way we're going to build a new text, a text from the things that matter to us about this element, about this definition. So No holds barred. Drop your sentences, your phrases, your word directly from the text when you see it. Just drop it in the chat. And I'm going to start we're kind of creating our new poem, a found poem of words that we find in this text. So we're just going to drop it in the chat when you hit something that really strikes you or makes you think. Okay, so go ahead and take just a minute and add to our collective rendering this essential part of the text to us. Yeah, we can keep going. And I want you to take a second and scroll up so you can see all of the beautiful, hopeful, world-changing possibilities that y'all have just held, uplifted, and are working together to make more true for all of our children. All children, every child.
Terry, I wanted to share, if you perhaps you're driving, listening in the car, or not at a space where you can see the chat, I just want to read some of these words that people looked at the document and lifted out of what it means, what this element means. So children are reflected, does not exist in isolation, celebrate diversity. Teachers also examine their own identities, culturally responsive, again, does not exist in isolation, diversity and differences. All children do not have the same opportunities. Persevering, preserving, and persevering, both are in that. Teachers create equity as they value and integrate children's culture. Culture matters.
Kind, fair, and just, engage authentically, build skills to reject injustice, recognize unfairness, value relevant. Culture plays a critical role. Teachers reflect on potential biases. Teachers support children to develop confidence and pride in their identity, their linguistic and cultural backgrounds, to be affirmed. All children benefit. So all children see themselves reflected. All children are being made visible. All children. What y'all did there, all children. Teachers systematically and authentically weave aspects of children and families' culture into the classroom. Mm-hmm. And that's love in action, right? And so thank you, friends, for taking that moment to think about, what does this mean? Why is this element so necessary for all children, for every child, and how all of us benefit from a world that is more fair and just, where we can identify things that need to change and work together to make them more real. So thank you for spending this time thinking together about, what do we mean together by this? What is meaningful to us about this element, and how might we work with some tools we're going to gather today, with some things we're already bringing to share collectively to make this more real. Thank you for rendering this text with me. This is also a really great thing to do in a professional development, or whenever you're thinking about something together that's complicated, because we got to learn from the text, but also more than that, learn from each other. So thank you, friends. We're going to do a little bit more of grappling together in other different ways as we move to the next slide, and another component of this closer look document. This is kind of tiny, so if you want to, like me, move a little closer to the screen, that's totally cool. But we're going to talk about what this actually looks like in practice. And a lot of us think about representation, and how can we be very intentional about making our classroom look and sound like our kids, and also what does it mean to plan and teach in this way, and how do we think about really integrating and interacting teachers, children, families, communities. So what we'd love for you to do is just, again, with that annotation tool, grab a stamp or draw or anything you choose, and put a star or a mark by anything you want to think about a little bit more in your own practice. There's something here, something you're like, yeah, this is a growing edge. This is an opportunity. This is something I want to think a little bit more about. So take just a minute. I know it's a little small, and we probably will do some reading for you too, if you need it, or we can drop something in the chat. Let us know so we can make sure everyone can participate. I'll give you just a minute to think about what you want to work on.
And tool is up at the top or bottom in your toolbar. It might be in the 3 dots more, but it has a little pencil. You click there and choose stamp, and you can put it next to the one that stands out to you.
And feel free also to drop anything in the chat if you prefer. We see folks who want to research more and learn more about the characteristics and issues relating to their children. People who want to integrate children's language and culture more into daily routines and curriculum. Who want to rethink roles and rules and practices to be more inclusive, fair, and meaningful. To engage in reflection about their own biases, ideas, perspectives. To talk with kids about how things could be made better, to be made more kind. There's a lot of meaningful work here to think about and to try to integrate and to grow in. To have conversations with one another, to learn more about each other, our cultures, our languages, to work together with our community, for our children and our teachers to stand up to make things better, to stand up for things we believe in, to build family partnerships that are real and meaningful, to make sure we're very careful about using children's names and calling them by their given names, by the names they choose for themselves, to make connections that are evident between the community, to use books that look and sound like our children. These are worthy goals. These are meaningful and relevant. And this is what it looks like to make our world more just, more fair. These are beautiful things. So take a minute, maybe jot down if you have a pen or a pencil or something in your heart, something that you want to be able to write down and remember. You set this goal, this intention. And so maybe jot it down so you can think about it tomorrow. What are some small ways that you can integrate some of these with more intention? Even tomorrow, we're going to come up with some more ideas in a minute, but knowing some things you've said you want to work on can help you select some of the things out of the many possible things that will help you meet tomorrow, your children, in a place where you want to be together.
And Deanna can drop this again in the chat. This all comes from the Closer Look document, and this particular part starts on page 6. So you can go deeper with this later. And I wanted to add, just when we think about this, this is all part of a course that's about developing the foundation for early learning, or for reading in the early years. And you wonder, okay, how does this all connect? It's not just about that this is a nice environment to create. It matters because kids can take risks. They can see themselves so that they can learn, so that they can learn to think critically, that they can learn to ask questions, so that they can make a difference in the world. And so we want to just lift up those connections, that ways we do these kind of things happen through strategies you hear about or you might be familiar with from Cox Campus. Like as you're making your lesson plans and including start reads or tips reads, as you're planning conversations using the talk strategy that we talk about on Cox Campus, we can bring in and work towards culturally responsive and preserving environments. It all connects and it all depends on each other.
Building a climate where all of us feel seen, heard, connected, and as if we're really appreciated and valued in that space helps us be brave, helps us take those risks and develop that content and build those connections with ourselves and the world, the one now and the one we want to build together. So thank you, friends, for taking a minute and thinking about a component of your practice that you want to hold up, look at, grapple with, and take up. We're going to go to another part. It's the third part that we want to really talk about today. That is a component of the Closer Look document. And this is one of my favorite parts because it's really a space to think about those things you want to work on and to have a question that you can grapple with, a question that you can sit with, a question you can ask alongside of someone who cares about you, cares about your teaching practice, and who you want to learn alongside of. So take a minute. These are the reflection questions that are at the end of this component of the Closer Look document under this element. And think about, are there any questions here that you want to grapple with, that you want to take up, that you want to talk about with a partner, a collaborator, a co-teacher, your director, a friend? Any questions here that are sitting with you? If so, I hope so. There are a lot here that I'm sitting with. If there are any that really are resonating with you, please drop the number of that question in the chat. We'd love to see you once, or you can feel free to come off of mute and let us know a question that's really something that inspires you to think about and talk about more with your friends and colleagues. I see a heart coming on. How culturally responsive and preserving are the books in my classroom? We have directors wondering about 5, 7, and 9, about whether all children are represented in the classroom, who is missing, how can we be more intentional, how can we partner with families to build culturally responsive and preserving learning environments, what specific steps can we take to intentionally support a more equitable and just world for each child and their family. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions that are sitting with you that you want to talk about with your colleagues, with your friends, with your collaborative teachers?
I see a couple of people thinking about question number 8 and question number 11, supporting children to value one another and work together for a more just world. 8, how am I working to promote a caring classroom community where members value and the differences and know how to talk about them together.
Another number 10 about how can our intersecting social identities, our race, our gender, our language, and our biases influence our work with and our support of young children and their families? How can we take action to uncover those biases and address them in justice-based ways? This is a powerful, ongoing question. Thank you for sharing. So these are not quick answers, right? These are not quick fix questions. These are questions to continue to grapple with. And so we hope that as you leave this space today and as you go into your own spaces, you get the closer look document out. You look back at these questions, you look back at these goals that you've set, and you work together with your colleagues to talk about them, to continue to talk about them, because we're never done with this work, right? And so we're hoping that, I hope that in your work, you find this document and these questions as helpful as I find it in my life and my questions and my coaching and my teaching and my becoming more kind and just in the world. So we hope that you find these helpful. We hope you pull them back out. And we hope that this is a set of tools, a set of resources that you can think about together with people that you care about and that care for you, as we work to make our world more just together and our spaces more representative and places where all of us can thrive.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we're going to jump into some practical. So what could this look like? As I reflect on these questions, as I think about where I am and where I want to go, what tools are out there to help me? And a lot of this content, it's in the ecosystem course, and it's also, you can check out parts of this are also in the supporting dual language learners course, connecting the dots for dual language learners. Certainly we want to be culturally preserving, even for children whose first language is English, but there's really a specific focus there in the dual language courses that are focused on dual language learners. And so let's talk about some tools. And I see some familiar faces and names in the chat that may have seen these recently. If you're familiar with these, maybe something new will stand out. If this is the first time seeing some of these tools, we hope you get some good ideas to try out. And thank you, Elizabeth. I see you put great reflection questions to share with family childcare homes. Awesome. Yeah, there's all different kind of contexts, home care providers, big centers, pre-K classrooms within public schools, private schools, and we want them to all be culturally responsive and preserving. And so this first tool, Deanna's going to drop in the chat. It comes in English and in Spanish. And this is the tool that we recommend everybody to use from teachers to families, asking people, what is your first language? Tell me about your culture. How do you feel about your first language? Who speaks what in your home with your child? How does your child use language? And how do you as a family member, mom, grandma, auntie, want to contribute, dad, to the classroom? And so you can get a lot of good information when we ask families and when we don't assume. And that's something I've really learned along the way, that if we don't ask, we might not know that there's another language and maybe a different culture represent or at home. And it shouldn't stay at home. We want to bring it into the classroom. And so we really encourage you to give this out to everyone, not just the people you think are dual language learners. And then if they're not a dual language learner and they don't want to share, it doesn't have to come back. And so if you know you have children that speak Spanish in your class, but you don't know what country their family comes from, it's really Colombian culture and Mexican culture are different, and there's different ways to represent that in classrooms. So we want to find out more about kids. So let's keep going. So this is a tool, and you can give this in paper, but it can also be a tool that maybe you use the guided conversation at a home visit or on the phone or in person with whoever that child loves and lives with and whoever's caring for them. And then once you get that information, you have a big stack, say, of 20 family language surveys, you want to start sorting them. And this classroom language plan, Deanna's dropping this in the chat, is a way to organize what you learn. So you might be like, oh, I didn't know I had 3 kids who speak Urdu. Let me put their names under first language 1, Urdu. Let me write the children's names. First language 2, Spanish, these children's names. First language 3, Nepali, I'll write these children's names. Who are my kids that only speak English? What are the countries of origin? Now, with all this in mind, what ideas do I have to support them? What resources do I already have? Who in my building can help me? What parent said they'd be willing to come in or to record some words in their first language to send in? And this is kind of an inventory of everything you've learned. And again, we're going really high level. You can find out more about this in the Supporting Dual Language Learners course. And all of these resources are on Cox Campus. And so the next resource is called I Can See Myself. And this, when you're doing that classroom language plan and you wonder, what could I do to make my classroom a place where kids can see themselves more? This is a quick front and back, just some ideas with pictures from real classrooms to give you some ideas about how to do that, how to make it culturally and linguistically representative. And so let's look one way. This is a teacher that we had the pleasure of working with that's in our courses, Deanna. And this is a classroom that's really diverse, many different cultures and languages. And let's see what she does for her children.
Today we're going to sing our hello song using the word hello in Arabic. And the word is the same in several people's languages in our class. It's the same in Noor and Eliana and Yusuf and Zaytuna and Susan and Jonathan and Mohibala. That's right. And Mohibala too. All right, you guys ready? You're in here. You're the last name in my page, okay? Salam Noor. Noor is our friend. Salam Noor. And here we go again. Salam Eliana. Eliana is our friend. Salam Eliana. And here we go again. Salam Yusuf. Yusuf is our friend. Salam Yusuf. And here we go again.
Now R for Robert. Minglaba Robert. Robert is our friend. Minglaba Robert. And here we go again. Salam Zubair. Zubair is our friend. Salam Zubair. And here we go again.
Right. So you see with Yasmin on the back of her paper plate, what you might not have seen, she didn't have to memorize how to say hello in all the different languages in her classroom. She wrote it on the back of her paper plate. And here is in Deanna's classroom, right by the door. So she could greet the children as they came in their first language. She wrote out for herself, like how to pronounce the hello. And she learned this from the families for each child. And so that is a tool that is part of this, or, a way to support yourself. Yeah, and Megan lifted up, should Ebonics be considered a different language? And there's a deep discussion, and we can, Terry, jump into, but we're talking about, right now I was talking about in these particular classrooms, specific different languages, but all ways that children come from home, all versions and dialects of English, or it could be other languages. Like in Burma, there's many, many different languages and dialects. We want to value each of them and not say that one has more value than the other, that the way you speak your language that you're loved in as someone I think that's Julie, or I'm trying to think who says that, the language that you're loved in, that's what we want to honor in the classroom. All right, and so here we see the little kids. And this is another way teachers remembered how to say hello. She put the little faces and how to say hello for that child. And that's right by the door so she can greet them. Okay. And here again, this teacher thank you to Mrs. Dadu who shared this, that she has these pictures and how to say them in the different languages in her classroom of common words that she uses. And on the right-hand side, you see a teacher's, this is like a little ring, all with focus words from
No,
the block
4.
set. And these are like how to say construct or how to build, high, and how to say that, how to pronounce that in the different languages, and they're color coded. Yeah, and all of these resources that are you're dropped in the chat, they're all on our Cox Campus template. They're all free. Cox Campus is free and shareable. So feel free to share these resources with anyone and print them as you see most helpful for you. And so here's Julie. She's doing a tamale wrapper. These are things brought in like in the kitchen area that they're familiar with from their culture. And they knew just what to do when they came to their classroom because they recognized them. And you see pictures on the right-hand side from the different countries represented, an Ethiopian coffee ceremony happening in a classroom where there were some children from Ethiopia. Terry, do you want to jump in and add anything on anything that I shared about dialect, language?
I just was referring Megan to our upcoming oral language course where we talk about this really in depth. It's a great conversation. And really, like, how do we make sure that all of our children see and hear themselves, that we're not talking poorly about the people who love all of our children? And how do we make sure we have a deep understanding of dialectical variation, of language variation? So stay tuned for more conversation about that as we talk about oral language development. Our K-3 course specifically is going into that conversation. So there's a lot of resources on Cox for us to talk more about that, and a lot to talk about as we work to be representative, as we work to be preserving, as we work to make sure that children are thriving in all of the spaces of their lives and all of the relationships of their lives, making sure that all of them is seen and welcomed and celebrated. And that certainly includes the language that we love in. And so how do we create space for all of our children to not be redirected and corrected, but to be honored and celebrated and expand their repertoire of engagement? So stay tuned, check back. We have a lot of resources coming very soon as that course is about to go live.
Thank you, Terry. And I would just add to all of this work, to do it with children, we have to be doing it ourselves, to always be learning and open. Like as a teacher, I've learned and as a coach the past 8 years, so many things. Like I think I taught many children from Burma, and then coaching in another classroom, realizing that there were languages I didn't even know to ask about. So we always want to be learning. And for us at Cox Campus, we are also trying to learn and grow. For example, this element originally was called just culturally responsive, and we added culturally responsive and preserving before putting the course up. And we did that because we want our kids to go into spaces that encourage them to preserve what they have and to flourish in that and to keep them going forward, not to shut it down so they feel like their identity is not welcome in learning spaces. And so that's why we added preserving. And that's kind of our lens on always trying to be open to learning and growing. All right. And so just some last few examples. These are all about me. We even have an all about me survey on Cox Campus, but these are books on the right-hand side that families made with kids. And these particular ones are in Spanish. What do they like? What do they care about? On the left side, instead of a book, they kind of made trifolds, and these were up all over the classroom. So kids could be like, look, that's my mommy, that's my cousin. And they could share with each other. And when visitors, like I came into the classroom, they all wanted to tell me about themselves. So some fun ideas.
Yeah. How can we have classrooms that look and sound more like our children than for them to be the text, right? Their lives and their families. We're going to talk about that exactly in this next slide. So, this may or may not surprise you, but when you analyze children's literature and you analyze the text you have in your classroom, I know some of us set that intention. Who is centered? Who are the protagonists? Who gets to be the world changers? Who has the action? And if you think about the children's literature that is available to us and available to our children, we're growing a little bit since 2018, but we still have a very long way to go because many books, many children's literature texts center white characters 50% in 2018 of children's literature centered white characters and white protagonists. 27 centered animals and anthropomorphized main characters like teapots. And while it's important to think about empathy in all our spaces, it's critical that we think about who gets to see and hear themselves in the books of our classroom. Less than 1% of our texts center Indigenous stories, Indigenous heritage, Indigenous realities, and American Indian and First Nations. If we think about 10% of our students that are African American are seeing, they're seeing 10% of the books that are centering characters that look and sound like them as the main agents in this story. There's so much work to do, and it's critical that we think about together and as a field who is seen and who is centered and how can we reshape that, and also who's writing whose stories, right? An own voiced and own illustrated story is very different from a story that someone that looks like me writes about someone else's culture and heritage. And so we need to really keep thinking about and critically consider the texts that are available to children in our classrooms, in our schools, and whether that is really creating a space that is celebrating and preserving and engaging, and where they see themselves and people who look and sound like them and who have lives that remind them of their own. So this is just a challenge for us all to think about as we think about the Literacy and Justice for All book list. So we're going to take a look in just a second at some great resources that are on Cox that have been compiled. On the next slide, you'll see them. They've been compiled by people from so many different organizations. As Rollins and our partners from Quality Care for Children and our partners from the community, we sat down and thought about, like, what would it look like to build curriculum that looked and sounded like all of our kids, that centers the global majority, that really centers families and their stories and their languages and their cultures in our work. And so what you see here on the right-hand side, you see books that are example books from our October curriculum. The inquiry question for October is, how do we create a community where everyone has what they need but takes care of each other? And you'll remember, probably, you have community as one of your themes and community helpers as one of your themes. And when we bump it back a little bit to ask a question that I'm asking, at my age, I'm asking, like, how do we create a community where everyone has what they need and we take care of each other? How do we ask that with 4-year-olds? How do we ask that when we're 104? How do we think about enduring questions that matter with beautiful texts that represent and look like us and that give us ideas of the world that we want to build? And so we hope that you will come check out the book list, see what resources you might integrate. There are resources around all of these books on Cox. But also there are opportunities and resources to center families. And you'll see in this resource, how can my community work together to help everyone? It connects to themes that we are teaching in our early care and learning classrooms already, but it also has ideas for families to connect together with each other and to really be centered and bring their ideas, their expertise, their stories, their history, their language into our classroom to make permeable the space, the classroom space and the home space. So we're all really working together to learn about each other, to celebrate our funds of knowledge, our community cultural wealth, our wisdom, and our heritage, our story, our birthright, and to have it be really more centered in our classrooms. So these are a couple of the resources that you might find, and the book list specifically will lead you to hundreds of books that you will probably find beautiful, engaging, representative. Does anybody notice anything when you take a look at just the books from our October book list? Any thoughts or ideas? I know the picture's a little small.
Feel free to come off mute and share, put your thought in the chat.
I see that they multicultural, they fall like
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, they're diverse, they're multicultural, they're multilingual, they're inclusive, where everyone belongs. Yeah, All Are Welcome is like a great example of that. These are the global village, the global majority, the connectedness that we have. They are certainly for a variety of age levels. The Literacy and Justice for All resources are birth through 5, and they have great, really great quality children's literature that is meaningful for me, and I'm 45. So I think you might find some really lovely texts here because they do teach us all something.
Yeah, and if you're on this call and you're in the K through 5 space, know that still some of these books that are listed for preschool and pre-K, I taught second and first grade too, that these will work in your context too. So don't feel like this isn't for you if you've decided to join this session and you work with a little bit older children.
What about younger kids, toddlers?
Yeah.
I do see top. Do I see?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So you see, there's even for infants, really simple board books, lift the flat books that still answer this question. They're still representative, still diverse, still multilingual. So we have from, you were just born today and we're going to read you a story because we love reading stories to children from day 1 all the way up, all different ages. All right, so we can keep going.
So if our mission as human beings, as people, is to make the world a better, kinder, more just place, and that's our work here, to think critically, to act boldly, there are a couple of really wonderful resources that I like to use for myself as I'm reading, as I'm thinking, as I'm grappling alongside of children. These are not mine, but they're ones that I keep returning to as I think about, I can ask questions of children and of myself that have a simple answer, right? Like, who is the main character? What were they doing? Or I can ask a more complicated question about their intention. How are they thinking and feeling? Why might they have made the choices that they made? And then I can start to think about okay, well, what does this mean for me, right? If we're thinking about what is relevant, what is worthy, what is connected, what makes the world more kind and fair, I can ask those questions. Was this kind? How might I act if I were that character? How do you think they felt when that happened? And you can start asking, if you move on this continua on the resource on the left over toward the right-hand side, you start asking questions about what does this make me want to do? If you're reading a book about being in community where we all take care of each other, you might ask who is missing and who is not being taken care of? And what might we do about that? How can I act with kindness today? So as we think about moving to the right, moving toward and now, then how shall I live, right? What should I do with this thing I'm learning about, with this world that I'm living in? And so thinking about that is very helpful to me as I move from what is in the book to what could be in the world. And that gives us a space to think critically about that and to act boldly. I love this ultimate cheat sheet for critical thinking too. Who's benefiting from this? Why is this the way that it was? What other possibilities could it be? There are great questions here they're great questions for me as I'm trying to think about how to live in the world. And they're also really great questions to ask alongside of children, because y'all know kids, they have a strong sense of the way that the world should be, of justice, of fairness, and when things don't feel okay for everyone. And so as we think about this together, how can we use some of these questions alongside of children? And how much more space for language does that offer? How much more space for agency, for change, and for being the writers of our own story and our own collective story? So we hope that you love these resources. There's some that I have returned to for years and years as I've thought about how to think alongside of books and children and community to make the world better, to grapple, to wonder, and to build more space for wonder and thriving for all of us.
Yeah, and Tara, I saw some people asking about these resources, and I did drop the link to the resource on the right, the ultimate cheat sheet for critical thinking. So that's there. The one on the left, I believe, comes from Making Strategies That Work.
It does. It's from Strategies That Work from Fountas and Pinnell. And it is a really wonderful one-pager that really just lets us think about metacognition in the center. Okay, so how can I visualize this? How do I understand this? But really toward action. So that is where this resource is from. And you can also Google it. It's really
Yeah.
a fantastic resource.
And we usually send a follow-up email. We'll talk to our Cox Campus team, make sure there's a follow-up email, and we'll put these links and we'll try to get that one for you too. And we're here at the end of our time, so we want to take just some quick minutes to close and go to these next few slides. Just really quickly, we want to point you, Deanna will drop this in the chat, but Terry, if I can just jump in,
Yes.
Bubble Map, this is an
Sure.
example of each book on that list. I think there's like 144 books, has connected resources. So you want to use that book to be culturally responsive and preserving. What activities can you do around it in math, in art, and literacy? There's a bubble map for each of those books you see, and those are all on Cox Campus. You can search by bubble map, by literacy justice for all to find those. And there's an example in the chat. And with each of those for preschool, you have visuals for dual language learners of the focus words. So if the word in there is unique, you might see a picture of all yellow tulips with one red tulip, and we'll see that on the next slide. Then you could actually introduce those to the kids and have visuals of the focus words, especially for kids developing in 2 or more languages. And those are in Spanish and English, and then you can look up that word if you have different first languages. And those really can support all kids. So those are some examples of resources that are there. This final slide just tells you 2 websites where you can find and order books in lots of different languages, especially languages that are hard to find, maybe Tigrinya or Nepali. And those are Starbright and Language Lizard, coming up on the next slide. So Starbright Publishing and Language Lizard, you can just Google those and go to those websites. And then finally here, we have some questions for you. Right before we put up the poll, we just want to ask, what's one idea from today that inspired you that we shared, or that you have an idea that might inspire somebody else? So drop those in the chat, what you're thinking after this conversation. And then we're going to put up a closing poll. We always want to figure out what we can do better. And we invite you to our upcoming sessions. We do this journey once a month. So our next session is October 9th. You can see all of this, 19th. All of this on our events page on Cox Campus. So we're asking you to first just share in the chat one thing you want to try, one way you're inspired. And I see Megan, wow, that was a lot. I'm so excited about learning more. We know we shared a lot. We hope that you can go back to the course on Cox Campus. It's the first course under all of our courses. It's called Ecosystem Approach to Developing the Foundation of Reading in the Early Years. So check that course out. Here it's coming up on our screen. Thank you, teammate. Go under educators to courses. It's in the infant and toddler track, and the same course is in preschool pre-K because it's relevant. And this is one piece of the content in that course. And then if you scroll, there's under preschool pre-K, there's also the supporting dual language learners and connecting the dots for dual language learners that have more of this content. But it's not limited to dual language learners, but that's one place to focus. And so I see people wanting to engage more with families, helping children thrive, that books are inclusive. Awesome. Thank you all. And so we're going to put up the poll. It's going to come up, and we want to hear from you. What went well today, what we could do better, and we really want to thank you for your time, especially your extra 5 minutes you've shared with us.
Thank you, friends. I see y'all saying there's more to learn. There is so much more to learn. And no matter where we are on the journey, there's so much more to learn about ourselves, about each other, and how to do this work for justice together. So thank you for your time, for being part of this worthy work. And we are so excited to see you at the next gathering on the 19th as we think about how to build rituals, routines, and transitions where kids find safety and connection, and where they can have space to be brave and to take risks for their learning.
And remember, you don't have to wait till October 19th. That every day on Cox Campus, there's courses to take, there's places to engage. We put the Cox Campus Facebook group. You can be sharing your ideas. Maybe today you learned something or thought about something new that you want to try, and you can post a picture, tell us a story about it. Let's keep this conversation going in other spaces. And we really encourage you to get in there and take this course about the ecosystem if you haven't already. and to come back to our next session. All right. So thank you
all so much for being here. We hope you have a beautiful evening. Thanks for spending this time with us, and thanks for the world-changing work you do every day.